with Martin Besser.
Joining us on the line this morning, leading epidemiologist, Professor Salim Abdool Karim. It's been a while. Good morning, good Professor. How are you?
I'm very well. Good morning, Martin, and good morning to all of the listeners.
Professor, thanks for your time. Just quickly, the relaxation of the rules, especially the fact that you can go to work now if you are COVID positive, I think left a lot of people a little confused. What are your thoughts about it?
Yes, Martin, we have reached a stage now where we have a clearer understanding about the way in which the waves occur. And what we know is that between the waves, we have roughly around 3 months where the infections are very low. And it doesn't really matter too much what restrictions you lift, with the exceptions possibly of gatherings, that during that period we can minimize our restrictions and that the virus doesn't flare up to any significant extent. So we've got to utilize that time. But we have to remember it's only temporary, because we have to then prepare for the next wave. And as we prepare for the next wave, we don't know what the next wave will look like. We don't know what the next variant will be because it doesn't exist yet. And so we have to be prepared that we will need to reinstitute certain restrictions based on what that new variant looks like. So we can't now just continue doing the same things over the long term, because the virus and the epidemic is changing, and we need to change and adapt to that. Now, some of it might not make sense. For example, when they say, if you have the infection, but you're not symptomatic, you can go to work. But if you're symptomatic, you must isolate. But symptomatic and asymptomatic, both groups can still transmit the virus.
Yeah.
So some of it doesn't quite make sense, but it's not that we're only acting on the science now. We're having to balance it. We're having to balance it with the needs of the economy and so on. So it's not like things were, 2 years ago where we had to just follow the science because we weren't clear about how severe the problem was. We now have room for flexibility.
How effective were the vaccines?
Well, we've been amazed in science that, the world managed to get a vaccine that was so effective against this virus so quickly. Within 9 months, we had a vaccine, and the vaccine, the first one that was announced, was the Pfizer-BioNTech, that was 95% effective in preventing infection. But what we've learned is that as new variants emerge, the vaccines are not always as effective against new variants. So that same Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine that was 95% effective against the original virus and was also very effective against the beta virus was not as effective against the Delta virus. Against the Delta virus, it was only about 60 to 65% effective. And against Omicron is even less effective. So what we're finding is that the new variants are able to escape some of that immunity and still cause infection. But the vaccines, no matter which one you're talking about and which variant we're talking about, the vaccines remain quite effective in the 80-90% range often for severe disease. So even though the vaccines might not protect you from getting infected, they protect you from having to go to the hospital. And that's a very important benefit.
That's all important, really. It prevents hospitalization and death quite significantly, even though it's less. The Omicron variant seemed to, am I right in saying it was a lot milder than people expected?
Yes, you are absolutely correct. When South Africa started announcing that we were seeing milder infections with Omicron back in December last year, people were very skeptical because they were used to Delta variant being quite severe. But now everybody has seen the same situation, and many countries have now reported that Omicron is much milder. From our own point of view in South Africa, it's significantly milder. To give you just some idea, we had in the Delta variant, about 24% of patients who were hospitalized died. That means, 1 out of 4 patients who go to hospital don't walk out the front door. That's really quite a severe problem to deal with. In Omicron, that was down to around 5%. So now that's down to 1 out of 20. So 19 out of 20 people are actually able to leave the hospital walking out. That's a big difference. And we're not sure exactly why that is so. One of the things is that this particular Omicron variant is very effective in infecting the cells of the nose and the back of the throat. They've shown that the nasal epithelium, the lining of the nose, this virus, Omicron, is 70 times more efficient in entering those cells. But because it's got that advantage, it's now got a disadvantage in that it is not able to infect the cells of the lungs easily. It's estimated that it's 10 times less effective in infecting alveolar cells. That's the cells of the small sacs in the lungs. So that's part of the reason. It's not the whole reason, but it's part of the reason why we are seeing such an infectious virus. I mean, you have one person walking into a restaurant with Omicron when everybody else's masks are off, and pretty much most people in the restaurant are going to get infected. It's so infectious. But they don't get the pneumonia. They don't get to the same extent. They don't get the very severe forms.
It's more like a cold than a flu, for instance.
Exactly.
Where are we at now? I mean, are there other variants that we need to be warned about? Where to from here? I think that's the big question, because we hear the president saying that they might drop, the regulations or the state of emergency. Then, of course, health minister saying no, it's staying. Other parts of the world are saying, listen, take your masks off and get on with your lives. What, in your experience and what you've witnessed, where are we at?
So, Martin, I think that most countries are acting in relation to where they are in the pandemic and what's their level of vaccination. Now, if we in South Africa had a high level of vaccination, let's say, we were 70% vaccinated, then we could release most of our restrictions, because then we won't be worried that the hospitals will get overwhelmed and that, we will be dealing with a crisis, because we know that the vaccines are highly effective. Right now, we are only at 30% vaccinated. That means we've got about 70% of the people not vaccinated. Now, some of the people have past infection, but past infection is not as good as being vaccinated with past infection, because when individuals who have past infection get vaccinated, they get much better protection. So everybody needs to be vaccinated. Now, if you don't have everybody vaccinated, you're lifting restrictions with a bit more care. You can't just do so willy-nilly, thinking everybody has some level of protection against severe disease, particularly. So, in many ways, our decision as South Africans to not get vaccinated is impacting our ability to go back to normality. Now, if we were highly vaccinated, we could quite readily lift most of our restrictions, possibly with the exception of 2 or 3 key regulations. Like, we can't allow, huge mass indoor gatherings, and we can't allow the dropping of indoor mask mandates, at least not for now. But other than, those few things, we could release mask mandates for outdoors. We could be allowing people to go back to sporting events. I mean, we could be doing quite a few things. But it has to be that we are confident that the population has protection from their vaccines.
All right, listen, I've got so many other questions for you about third and fourth jabs. Just quickly before we wrap up. You still recommend third jabs? I see some countries are talking about fourth jabs for the vulnerable.
Yeah, I think those that are recommending fourth jabs are doing so, but earlier than the evidence requires or suggests.
All right.
But third jabs, yes. Take a third jab.
Now, final question. The next wave. What are we, timing-wise, and we're basing this off what's happening in other countries, right? What's happening around the world. That's the prediction.
Actually, we base it more on what's happened historically in South Africa.
Okay.
As we've seen with Omicron, we are in the lead. What happened here in Omicron, the rest of the world followed.
Okay.
So we will work on the basis, roughly, that we get a wave after about 3 months. So our Omicron wave ended about 2 weeks ago or so. So that means that we've now got about 3 months before we'll see the next wave. So we can expect that we will see the fifth wave probably at the end of April or so, thereabouts. Now, it will be driven by a new variant because it won't be Omicron coming back again. Or that's unlikely to happen because you get good Omicron immunity. What's at issue? What is that new variant going to look like? And that nobody can predict because the variants don't come from each other. Beta didn't come from Alpha. Delta didn't come from Gamma. Omicron didn't come from any of the others. Each variant is independently being created, and they're being created in all the different continents. So we have no idea where the next variant is going to come. What is it going to look like? Is it going to be severe like Delta? Is it going to be mild like Omicron? We can't tell. That is the uncertainty we have to work with in this pandemic.
There are a lot of things we don't know. The one thing that seems to be probable is that it's going to be around for a while, like flus. Flus come and go every year, and they, sometimes it's a hectic flu, sometimes it isn't. The best we can do is just build up our resistance.
Yeah, I mean, we have to accept that this is going to be here for quite a long time because we cannot eliminate it from human population easily. And even if we could, remember it infects animals. I mean, there was a Delta outbreak in Hong Kong from pet hamsters. In New York, the white-tailed deer were infected, and people were getting infected from the deer. So, we have to understand that even though animals are not a major source of transmission, they do harbor the virus. So this is going to be with us for a long time. And we just need to accept that that's what we have to prepare for. And we have to hope that we will build the kinds of immunity and the next generation vaccines that will give us good protection.
Good, Professor. We've run out of time. Thank you for your time once again. All the best. Love to your family, and thanks for your time.
Oh, wonderful. It's a pleasure. Thank you very much, Martin.
Thanks, Professor. Salim Abdool Karim there on the line. If you missed any of that, or you want to hear it again, we'll put it up for you on audio on demand on jacarandafm.com.
1, 2, 3. Let's be crazy. Let's be kind. You're with your morning family. Breakfast with Martin Bester.